All right, what's going on there, folks? Friday night. It is the Earthmaster back here. It is December 8th, 2023, about 10:43 here p.m. California time. Latest activity shows 1.2 California. Also some movement down here along the Kermadec Trench near the Kermadec Islands. 5.0 coming in there along that plate boundary. I did see some interesting activity out here in the North American plate earlier. A 3.0 coming into Ohio, of all places, near Jackson City, Ohio. This earthquake coming in relatively shallow at about 6 kilometers or so. Mainly felt in the area of, it looks like Sydney area. Not a huge area, but a few folks did report feeling this unusual shaking out there in Ohio. Of course, we have seen a little bit of earthquake movement out there in the past year or so, mainly up here around the Great Lakes area of Ohio. Got to remember, North American plate is always underneath strain with the potential depletion of underground water, fracking operations, oil pumping operations, water movement. It does play a part on some fault systems out here, and occasionally we do see some earthquake activity in some unusual zones. Also, Idaho's seen a earthquake out here in the Grand Teton National Park area. Goodness, what's going on up there against that beautiful mountain range? I absolutely love this area of Wyoming. 3.6 up here outside of the Grand Teton National Park, Idaho area. About 10 kilometers deep, right there on the border, but the borders out here mean absolutely nothing in terms of the plate stress and the fault systems out here. This is just in terms of reference. Also some movement up here around Mount Hood. A beautiful, absolutely beautiful volcano up here outside of Portland, Oregon. You can see this as you travel across the Columbia River up here. It doesn't matter if you're on the north side or the south side of the river. It's all beautiful, and you can see this beautiful volcano for many, many miles away. This earthquake activity occurring in the last 24 hours. Very small earthquake activity, but on the southern flank here of Mount Hood. So on that note, I do need to go check out, see what's going on up there across the area. By the way, tremor activity here. It looks like about 16 epicenters of tremor in Northern California. Volcanic seismicity around Mountain Hood. There's the earthquake activity in question there, the southern flank of Mountain Hood. You never know. We've been living in these quiet times. You know, your mom, your dad, your grandpa, maybe your grandpa or your grandma. All these volcanoes have been around for quite a while, right? And you may see them in pictures, but they have not been active for the most part in terms of our recent history. Yes, Mount St. Helens, but Mount Hood, other areas around the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada mountains have not been all that active. But one day they will be active for either us or maybe our children or our grandchildren. Right now we're just living in some simpler times. Far as volcanic activity goes here across the West Coast. So there's that earthquake activity. Let's take a look at some of these seismograph stations, see what's going on out here. We should be able to see those few earthquakes or so showing up on the graph. There's one of them, but this is pretty recent. This is in the last couple minutes or so. Let's check out the previous day. Maybe a couple here. One right there, one right there. And some of this other activity, not so much, but definitely seen some earthquake activity out there. And definitely within the last couple minutes or so, it looked, well, what is this? UTC time is 0620. UTC time right now is 0640 or so. So definitely a little bit of activity showing up here in the last couple minutes there around Mount Hood. Volcano, really not seeing anything major going on. Let me check out this seismograph station. It may be a little bit closer. Mount Hood Meadows. I'm sure it's an absolutely beautiful area. I've seen it a handful of times. That earthquake showing up on this seismograph station as well. Previous updated graph. Kind of hard to decipher earthquake activity aside from environmental noise. This is a little bit, this kind of reminds me of a FM radio station there that's got a lot of static in it. It's hard to decipher some of the earthquake activity out there. But obviously some of it is showing up on a few stations out there. Let's see if Lamberson Butte is checking it out. There it is right there. Showed up pretty nicely. I love this station here. It looks beautiful. Let's check out the previous data. 1, 2. See, this is what a seismograph station should look like everywhere. You can see the earthquakes in question there. Very prominent. Nothing big going on. I don't see any magma movement. Some of this other earthquake activity could be rock falls. It could be wind events. But definitely the earthquake activity showing up pretty nicely there in a handful of various time frames. But for now, as mentioned, it looks like most of those earthquake events are showing up here on the USGS map. So that's good. I'm glad they're reporting that. Cross Mount St. Helens, a little bit further up north, is seeing about 4 earthquakes or so. In the very small microquake range, nothing going on across Mount Rainier for now. Let's see what we got for Northern California around the Clear Lake Volcanic Field. Cobb Mountain area seeing quite the amount of earthquake activity out here. Of course, this is the Calpine hydrothermal operations. Mankind has basically invented a way of creating energy out here in the heated surface below by injecting raw sewage below the surface to create some type of steam, some type of energy. And that powers quite a few homes out here across the Bay Area. Pretty disgusting. But at the same time, it is what it is. Humans are some intelligent creatures, let me tell you. Around the Long Valley supervolcano, a handful of earthquakes up here today, including 2.8. Looks like that earthquake occurring a little bit earlier this morning. Nothing major going on there, but continuing to watch the Southern California area. One earthquake here right smack dab on the San Andreas Fault in the last hour, 1.0. Did see some shaking going on out here earlier into the region of the Yucca Valley area. Had a couple folks there email me saying that this earthquake kind of got their attention out there. Of course, the 3.3 right around the San Andreas Fault, I think would get anyone's attention. Looks like there's been a handful of smaller earthquakes in that vicinity. It's definitely a concern here in Southern California because we don't know exactly how much stress the San Andreas Fault, how much more it will take. It's obviously well overdue. It's been talked about for many, many years, even since I was a kid. So, time has passed. Strain has built. This thing cannot, I don't think it can go on for another 50 years or so. No way. Absolutely not. I think we will see the big one happen well before then. The question is, will it happen tonight? Will it happen tomorrow? Will it happen in 2024? We don't know. I don't have the magic earthquake ball to predict this or forecast it. All I know is that we got to watch areas over here across the eastern areas of the plate boundary. That includes areas that we've seen today where that three-pointer struck. That's where a lot of the strain and stress builds up following the plate boundary stress. And we've definitely seen it somewhat heightened over here across this area. So it's just a matter of time before we see that 8.1 earthquake shake things up out here in California. I don't think it's going to be much longer. But who knows when? I can't set an exact date, but I think it's coming up here soon. Some activity down in the Salton Sea area as well. It's a 1.2. Backing out of here, Texas area, still seeing a handful of earthquakes out in the oil fields. And there's that earthquake out in the Ohio area, a 3.0. Far as the rest of the globe here, the rest of the flat scale model Earth, there's that one earthquake down into the Amberley area of New Zealand earlier this afternoon, my time, 4.2, roughly around the South Island area, off the plate boundary here north of Christchurch. That was felt pretty broadly over the area. Far as reports coming in here, doesn't look like a whole lot of reports coming in from the USGS. Most of this activity would probably be shown up here on the GeoNet servers, which is, I'll check these guys out real quick and see what's going on. There was a 4.1 here just off the North Island coast here about 47 minutes ago. But there's that 4-pointer. GeoNet servers reporting it as a 4.4. The shaking map shows obviously a good amount of folks reporting it across North and South Island area. Weak to light, maybe some moderate shaking as well. Not for sure that someone felt a strong shaking way up north in North Island. Of course, got to remember this is all subjective, right, to one's own surroundings and what they perceive as some strong shaking. But total tally, it looks like about 558 reports being reported out there for the GeoNet servers on this 4-pointer that struck earlier today. So kind of keep an eye on that. Obviously, it is expected to move. We do have quite a few areas out here around the Alpine Fault and the Hikurangi subduction zone that I think are overdue for some earthquake activity in terms of larger scale movement. Still seeing some activity around the Vanuatu area, although most of that is from earlier this morning. Solomon Sea, a couple earthquakes, including the 4.8 here earlier this afternoon. Well, earlier this evening, it looks like about 51 kilometers deep. Regions out here around the Philippines, activity has dwindled down as expected. The last earthquake of 4.5, getting some further migration here of the plate pressure around the plate boundary. Up north around Taiwan here, just off the coast of Taiwan, 4.5, 96 kilometers deep. Seeing a little bit of elevated movement out here. The Kuril Kamchatka remains awfully quiet for some oddball reason. It's a little odd out there for sure. Another region that has seen some uptick today, earlier this evening. Check this out. Quite a few handful of earthquakes out there in the northern Atlantic. South of Iceland, southwest of Iceland out here. We've seen a pretty good amount of earthquake activity around the Reykjanes Ridge here. Quite a few 4s and even a 5-pointer out here earlier this afternoon. So what's going on with Iceland? Is that going to stir things up? I think it's possible. Now, the latest informational statement here was put out a couple days ago. I'm not going to go into that again, but there's no major changes there. As far as the earthquake activity around the Reykjanes Ridge south here, well, that's much further south here than this region, a little bit further down along this area. Now, we have seen an uptick a little bit further north here along the plate boundary, north of, let me show you guys here. This is where the earthquake activity struck earlier this afternoon. The movement I'm showing you right now is roughly about here. That is working its way up towards the Iceland area. We've seen an elevated movement here of earthquake activity across the rift zone. Quite a few 2s stirred up here. No obvious movement here across Iceland yet, but as you can see, further south we have those 4s and 5s. Now we're getting the 2s up here. This should potentially kick up overnight. We should see an uptick in earthquake activity here across Iceland. Maybe a renewal of magma influx here across the Grindavik area, or maybe outside of this zone here. Right now, pretty quiet around the Grindavik area of Iceland and the surrounding communities. So keep an eye, though. It's working its way up here across this rift zone. If we don't see it tonight, it should take place maybe tomorrow. South America got a huge cluster of earthquakes out here into the Peru-Chile Trench. That's a little concerning because this area is very capable of producing some mega quake activity out here. And it's been a little while since we've seen any huge mega quake activity. But you can see it right there on the map. central South America region, also down south in the Chile area. A couple forests stirring up down around the plate boundary here. So it looks like things may be getting ready to rock and roll out here across this area of the plate boundary in terms of large-scale movement. The 4s and 5s are generally a light day in terms of earthquake activity. We can see some 9-pointers out there easily. All right, let's see what else we got. Mediterranean looks pretty quiet for now on the USGS map. A handful of smaller earthquakes out there, so keep an eye on things. They're definitely getting interesting more towards the southern hemisphere of the Earth. And for some reason, they always tend to coincide with one another. We always look at activity starting up here north, central, and then right now we're seeing the southern hemisphere of the Earth showing some elevated activity here, including Kermadec Trench, South America region. All right, let's check out space weather. Space weather. What's going on in the space weather terms out here? We did have an M flare kicking up earlier from a sunspot region that is no longer really of concern, and that's going to be this region down here. It's currently flaring, and as you can see, it's got a bright feature out here. It did spark off an M flare. In fact, an M 5.4 flare earlier this evening. Look at that. Created a moderate R2 radio blackout here on the sunlit side of the Earth, centered over the, looks like the Central Pacific here. Was not associated with a ejective CME. It was more of an impulsive flash, flare, so to speak. So that is not going to produce a CME. Even if it did, I don't think it would be Earth-directed with that location. We are looking at 35, I think that's 3513 up here, right? 3513. That does kind of harbor some potential for some flaring still. But as I mentioned earlier this morning about this area, I said keep an eye on this area because it's looking fairly complex and it's growing now that it's facing away from Earth. And of course, we get a large M flare. It never fails, folks. I think it comes down to the quantum physics. Quantum physics. If you haven't studied quantum physics, it sounds like a big word, but basically it talks about how everything's interconnected, so to speak, and everything is aware. Awareness. Not even joking. It may sound like a crazy idea. The sun can't be aware, right? The Earth can't be aware, right? Oh, you're dead wrong in that aspect. The sun is very aware. The Earth is very aware as well. So when things are observed, they behave much differently. Well, we still have a 99% chance for a C flare, M flare at 40% chance, X flare around 5% chance or so. No major expected CMEs here. No major aurora forecast there. We do have severe weather potential here. We got a slight risk coming up tomorrow, folks, for the areas of the south. Now, if you guys are out here, you need to be weather aware. There is a 5% chance and a large 2% chance of tornado potential out there. We're talking about some huge population densities, up around 19 million people in the 5% zone. New Orleans, Louisville, Lexington, Birmingham, Alabama, Baton Rouge, all you folks out there looking at the potential of some severe weather. It's no joke. You guys have to play it safe and make sure you guys have a weather radio out there for tomorrow, just in case things get a little on the sketchy side in terms of that severe potential. You guys got not only the tornado potential, but wind and hail damage out there as well. I've been covering the West Coast quite a bit out here, and I've been wanting and waiting for a setup that will throw low pressure storms out here across the West Coast, and I think we are going to see it. And I kind of want to show you guys what I mean out here. The upper level dynamics out here play a big part. This is a jet stream, right? This is, of course, California out here. Got a high pressure kind of ridge out here shooting up north and then dipping down. Well, what brings most of the storms out here in an El Nino year or any winter time pattern is a left to right linear linear fashion jet stream. Basically, something like this, right? See this left to right type fashion? That would bring storms into a general area. I want to show you guys what happens here around the 15th of December. We are looking at a major pattern change here across the entire Pacific here. This is what could potentially bring in some big time storms out here for the West Coast. That is a huge jet stream, a lineal, there we go, left to right type jet stream. And these are some huge numbers out here. We're probably talking about off the chart. And this right here could bring some large systems out here to the West Coast. It's still a little ways out there, but this pattern right here is stretching more and more towards the west here, or towards the east, and that includes the West Coast out here. And this kind of lines up with what these other models have shown in terms of the seasonal forecast. How they're talking about this is December, this is January. Notice these storm systems really ramping up. This is elevated precipitation out across the West Coast for January. February shows increasing activity there across Northern California, specifically across Northern California in that darker green area. And most of the weather models are trending towards much wetter conditions out here across areas of the West Coast. If you choose all of these, the majority of them are showing California getting hit with some specifically large systems. This one's showing some very dynamic activity out there for February. January shows pretty dynamic as well. So when you have agreement of all models for the most part, then you can pretty much assume that, hey, California is going to get some pretty decent rainfall here coming up here real soon, January, February, and March. So even though we haven't seen it December yet, but I think the pattern change here, as I showed you guys in the mid to late, about the third week of December, that's when we're going to see things really ramp up and change out here. And I'm pretty excited about it. If you guys know me, you'll know I'm not a fair weather guy. I'm not one of those guys that like to sit out on a sunny day and say, wow, this is nice weather. Yeah, that's cuckoo. That's not me. I like the crazy weather out here. That's just how I am, right? What good is boring weather? Maybe if you want to have a picnic. I'm not a picnic type of guy. Okay. So precipitation, total accumulated precipitation map out here. Let's see what we got. Let's run this over here the next couple runs. Notice the increasing moisture here about mid-month off the west coast here of California. That's going to be that jet stream slamming into California. And we got some pink out there, maybe some purple. That includes 4 to 5 inches of rainfall. So this is just going to be I believe, what's turning into a permanent pattern change here. Maybe not permanent in terms of yearly, but permanent in terms of the seasonal. This is wintertime out here across the California area. And we are looking at an El Nino pattern, and a very strong El Nino. So we could be looking at sufficient rainfall peaking up here as we head into December. January, February, and March is expected to be quite wet out here across the West Coast. So get used to it. Out there across the eastern seaboard as well. But to me, this makes me happy. Makes me want to just jump up and down and go crazy. But I'm a big fan of the weather, right? Japan, what do we got going on in Japan right now? It looks like a little bit of earthquake. Well, not a little bit of earthquake, but looks like something brewing up there right now as we speak. Not for sure. I guess we'll have to check on it. Like I say, it's just coming in around the Japan area. In the meantime, folks, just stay safe out there. Have a good night. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back here tomorrow morning. Saturday morning update. A lot of activity stirring up out here. Mainly, it seems like it's south of the hemisphere right now, of the equator, I should say. Southern hemisphere of the Earth. Definitely showing some elevated activity out here. I'll catch you guys back here a little bit later tomorrow. Take care, folks.